Dear respected teacher, dear beloved community, good afternoon. Today is the 20th of June, if I'm not mistaken, in the year 2023, and we are on the fourth day of our Earth retreat. It's wonderful to be together in person and online. This morning we had a wonderful, very powerful panel presentation. We heard about the power of radical love, the power and the possibility of radical love. Again, in the guided meditation just before this talk. So it's wonderful to feel the possibility of that unlimited radical love together. Last week, some of us were invited to join a gathering of CEOs. There were about 40 CEOs of some of the biggest companies in France and in the world, and 3 monastics. It was quite strange. They didn't really know what we were doing there. We didn't really know what we were doing there. But we were there. And we tried to be really there. And there was a discussion, probably lasted almost 3 hours. And everybody was invited to share, a microphone was passed around. And everybody was invited to share what they were most excited about and what they were most afraid of. And it was, in a sense, around the topic of artificial intelligence. Right? So they're all CEOs, they're having to face the question of how to integrate artificial intelligence. It's not the question of whether to integrate, right? That's already decided. But how? And what it means for their business. Are they excited about it? Are they afraid of it? What are they excited about? What are they afraid of? It was a very interesting discussion. We learned a lot listening to them. It was like a snapshot of the kind of collective consciousness, at least of the business world right now. And what was interesting to me, I was reflecting as I was listening, was that all of the challenges that were discussed were human challenges. And all of the opportunities that were discussed were human opportunities. And the solutions were human solutions. And I've been saying to people for a while that we live in a world which is dominated by this scientific materialistic paradigm. And some people look at me a little bit like, what? What are you talking about? Are you sure? Is that true? Because many of us feel like we don't fully subscribe to that paradigm, right? To that description of reality. So when I say to people that that paradigm is the dominant one, at least in industrialized nations, a lot of people tend to want to disagree with me. And so first of all, because I know maybe not everybody has English as a first language, so I don't mean consumerism, right? When I say materialism, scientific materialism is not consumerism, right? It just means the belief that everything in the cosmos is made of matter only, right? And of course there's an equivalence between energy and matter, and there are laws governing that. But basically the belief that there is a real physical universe which is independent from consciousness, and in that description there is actually no description of consciousness. It's interesting. It's a strange picture of the world. Consciousness doesn't actually fit in it, and science has some trouble accounting for that. So I believe it's the dominant paradigm, not because I like it or because I agree with it, but because I notice that in many situations, when it comes to questions of governance and of politics, this is the paradigm that we rely on. So all of our economics is based on that paradigm. Right? So it doesn't mean that we like it or we agree with it. And I was noticing in this room of CEOs that all of the problems that they were talking about and all of the solutions that they were talking about were in the terms of that reality. Which was interesting to me because I know that at least some of those people have a spiritual practice, but it's dissociated from how they have to show up in the business world. And ultimately they have to talk about profit, the bottom line. Are they successful? Are they competitive? And I've noticed as well in the climate conferences, some of us had a chance to attend COP26 in Glasgow. There's space for the spiritual dimensions out in the street, where the protests are, where the music is, where the joy is, where the dancing is, right? And the babies. It's very joyful, it's very alive. The whole body is there, right? The earth is represented there. But once you go in to the conference rooms where everybody's wearing suits and the lights are bright white neon and all the tables are white and the walls are white, everything is white. And there, the language changes. And everybody feels that they have to speak in terms of measurables, statistics. And I'm not saying that that stuff is wrong either, right? Okay, so I love science. I think science is wonderful. We're not going to get out of our current predicament without science. But science alone, to me, is not enough. Science needs a friend. And so listening to that discussion in that room, I wondered what it would be like to invoke spiritual solutions to the many intersecting crises that we face. We call it the polycrisis. It's not just the climate crisis, it's also the biodiversity crisis, the pollution crisis, the inequality crisis, the inequity crisis between the global north and global south. There are many, many different social crises of discrimination of various kinds. All of these crises intersect. So I was asking myself, what would it mean in this room, of CEOs to invoke spiritual solutions? What would they look like? How would they sound? Throughout the whole discussion, I was looking at there was a kind of floral arrangement in the middle of the table. Very beautiful. I was looking at these plants and wondering if I could speak for them and what that would mean. To bring in something other than human, something more than human, into the space, into that discussion. There was discussion of the climate, right, and of the climate crisis, but it was still in human terms. It was, what is its impact on us? Is it convenient for us? Inconvenient? So sometimes it seems like the spiritual dimension in those settings is tolerated as long as it stays in the private domain. You can have a spiritual practice, just don't talk about it. Just, behind closed doors. Otherwise it will lead to disagreement and discord. So just, it's your business. But you have to put on your CEO hat and be realistic. Talk in terms of the hard realities of economic truth. But this morning we heard that the inner transformation and the outer transformation are not two separate things. Right? Satish Kumar described it as being like the rooms of a house and the walls of the house. They're not separate. They inter-are. And we often speak about that in our tradition, that we have confidence in the power of the spiritual dimension to effect systems change. But quite often when we offer retreats and we offer teachings like that, we still get questions at the end, which are a little bit like, yes, okay, but what about systems change? What are we actually going to do? What is your proposal? I said, but we told you, right? Didn't we tell you? Yes, you said, breathe and walk. And I get it. Sure, breathe, walk, smile. Yeah, great. But what about, systems change? So it seems that the message isn't quite clear enough yet. So I thought maybe today I would try to do some brainstorming. See if we can find our way to navigate between these apparently different ways of thinking. Apparently. So this morning we also heard that the systems that we live with, the systems of production, regulation, legislation, systems of the kind of technological civilization that we live in, are an expression of our collective consciousness. So if that's true, then if our collective consciousness changes, then those systems will also change. Which would mean that the quality and the nature of our collective consciousness is very, very important. And that if we could change our view, our way of seeing ourselves, our way of seeing the planet and our relationship to the planet, then systems change would follow. So what would that mean? Because we could ask, what is this new view that we should have? And I think many of us already have a sense of what that could be, how that could be characterized. But the real question for me is, how do we transform our view, individually and collectively, as a community, as a Sangha? So we could talk about the view, the insight of interbeing, seeing the interconnected nature of ourselves, our interdependence with each other, with the earth. And in a sense, that's been around for a while, right? We get it. Intellectually, fine. I'm pretty sure everyone in this room is already down with that. You know, interdependence. Sure, let's do it. You know, great. And yet, in some situations, we collapse back onto other kinds of views, and in certain situations, we may be affected by the wider collective consciousness, which isn't quite there yet, maybe. So when we show up for work, you know, in business settings, maybe it's harder to speak from the view of interbeing in a way that still seems effective and powerful. It's easy to get criticized a little bit in those boardrooms, and you know, oh, that's just woo-woo spiritual stuff. That's not realistic. We have to be realistic. We even hear it here. You know, people have an amazing experience on retreat, and then there's a little bit of a tendency to go, okay, yeah, great, that was great. But now I have to go back to the real world. So what do you have for me? What do you what am I going to do in the real world? It's fine here in Plum Village. Everybody's nice. We're all spiritual. But you don't know what it's like out there in the real world. This isn't realistic. So I want to challenge that view a little bit. I think we have to challenge ourselves. In Buddhist teaching, we learn about two different ways of understanding reality, two different ways of seeing, two different ways of describing reality. And it's important to know that both exist in the Buddhist teaching because they appear to be contradictory. In fact, they are contradictory, fully contradictory. And when we run into those contradictions, we have a tendency to want to resolve it one way or another to make only one thing true. So we speak about the historical dimension, right, in which you are outside of me, I am outside of you, we are different, we are separate. You know, Thai would sometimes say the cow is not the ice cream. That was before the community was vegan. You know. Now it would be like the coconut is not the ice cream. You know. Right? The human is not the planet. They're different. And according to the historical dimension, there is before and there is after, there is cause and effect. And there is a sense of urgency. When we think about the climate crisis, the clock is ticking. Many, many, many clocks are ticking. And for some scientists would even say that it's already too late. That we are already well on the way to a world in which our current way of living is impossible, in which our civilization will collapse. Not everybody wants to hear that, and I understand. It's uncomfortable. And we hope that it's wrong. But right now, the North Atlantic Ocean is 5 degrees above its average temperature for June. 5 degrees. Many, many, many marine animals will die. It is so far outside of the temperature tolerance for those species. It's an enormous difference. There are already hurricanes developing in the southern Atlantic. It's only the second time in recorded meteorological history that hurricanes have developed. The last time It was in 1933. And there's two. The Arctic summer ice is at its lowest level ever. The Antarctic ice is growing slower than it's ever grown before. It's winter in the Antarctic, but the ice is much, much less thick than it should be. Some climate scientists are already saying we've passed the tipping points. We are in a kind of unstable situation. They don't even know what's going to happen, even this year. So that's the historical dimension. It can seem pretty bleak and urgent. And, in the Buddhist tradition, we also speak in terms of the historical dimension. Sometimes we say, when you first come to the monastery, they say, practice like your hair's on fire. You have one precious life. Don't miss your chance. You won't be young forever. Practice now, before it's too late. Time flies like an arrow. It seems to be urgent. But then you come back for another visit, a year or two later, and they say, don't worry. Everything's fine. Practice the practice of non-practice. You already are what you want to become. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just breathe, smile. It's very confusing. How on earth do these two things go together? It makes no sense. Right? Very confusing. So there's a sense of urgency on one side, and on the other side there's a sense of timelessness, eternity. Don't need to do anything. Everything is already perfect exactly as it is. So from the point of view of the historical dimension, that seems to make no sense. But when we can touch the ultimate dimension, it is clear that is not something which is far away or unattainable. We can touch that experience of timelessness, of freedom, the freedom of eternity. We may touch it in walking meditation, sitting meditation. Suddenly, all of that sense of running after something, needing things to be different, just falls away. So how can both these things be true? I struggled with this for a long time when I first encountered the teaching. And I think it's partly because of the way the words are translated. The ultimate dimension sounds like that's the real one. That's the real truth. And the historical truth is the sort of the wrong truth, the untrue truth, right? The one you have to sort of replace with the ultimate. We should just dwell in the ultimate and forget about the historical dimension. At least that's what I thought at first. I kind of thought that was the solution. Turns out I had not understood. So on one side we have the historical, and on the other side we have the ultimate. And this apparent paradox or contradiction exists in many traditions, not just in the Buddhist tradition. So the physicist David Bohm, he described also two levels of reality, two ways of understanding reality, which he called the explicate order, in which everything is outside of everything else. This is the normal realm of physics and engineering, where we can calculate the trajectories of things, and we know where they start and they end, and we can predict things. And he also described what he called the implicit order. He coined these words, explicit and implicit. They don't otherwise exist in English, but they're based on the notion of things being explicit, clear, visible, understandable, and implicit, in which things are multi-layered, that one thing contains maybe everything else. There's a kind of holographic nature. You look at the flower, and as Tai has taught us so well, when we look at the flower, we don't just see a flower. We see the clouds, the rain, the earth. We see the whole of evolution on this planet. And we see the sunlight. If you try to take the sunlight out of the flower collapses. And we look into one thing and we see all things. The whole cosmos is implicit in the flower. In the Western philosophical tradition, we have the phenomenal realm, the realm of phenomena, and the noumenal realm, the realm of noumena. We could also call it the spiritual, the temporal, and the spiritual. Or the profane and the sacred. So, according to the worldview of scientific materialism, this is real, right? The historical dimension is real. It's the realm of matter, of real things that we can measure, that we can weigh, that we can, measure their size, their shape, their speed, their momentum, their position. Right? We can make predictions about them. And this, according to scientific materialism, doesn't even exist. It's imaginary. Right? If it does exist, it's only in our heads. So it's probably not important. Right? The thing is, if we only have this, the historical, then it puts us in a certain kind of relationship with stuff, with the earth. We might have a tendency, according to that way of seeing, to view the earth as just matter. And if it's just matter, just stuff, just, atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, then what we do to it doesn't matter, right? It has no moral weight because it's inert, inanimate, can't feel anything. So we may have a tendency to see the earth as being there for our use. And if you look at the way our civilization behaves, right? I mean, if you want to know what a civilization believes, then look at what it does, not what it says. And if we look at what our civilization does, it seems that this is what we believe. That it doesn't matter if we scrape away the surface of the earth and dig and dig and dig and extract and use. It doesn't matter if we kill to do that. That's what we're doing. But we didn't always see the world like that. Right? We didn't always make decisions like that. That meeting that happened last week of these CEOs would have happened very differently 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. It wouldn't have been possible to have that meeting without somebody, or probably everybody, invoking the realm of the divine. But now it is. Now it's normal to have those types of conversations without saying anything about the spiritual dimension. It'd be kind of awkward if you did talk about the spiritual dimension, actually. A little bit inconvenient. So as I've been reflecting on these two different ways of seeing, it struck me that there is a fundamental difference between the two types of view. That the historical view, the way of seeing the world, which sees it as basically matter, inert matter, stuff, has a tendency to deny the existence of the ultimate. Whereas the view from the ultimate, from into being, from the spiritual dimension, does not, generally speaking, deny the existence of the physical world. So one has a tendency to exclude the other, and the other is capable of including both. Right? There is and we can look into our own minds. There's an aspect of our own mind which wants everything to be pinned down, explicable, made explicit. Just tell me, is it this or is it that? It can't be both. Right? We have that in us. Right? But we also have within us this other way of seeing, which is like, oh, that's interesting. Different ways of describing things. How wonderful. Maybe they can coexist. Now, if you read a poem, the poem only works because it has multiple layers of meaning. The metaphors resonate a little bit outside of your grasp. If you try to explain it to somebody, you say, oh, well, actually, what this means is, actually, then there's no more poem. What was the point of the poem? You just get an explanation. But try that with a joke. Jokes only work because you don't explain them. Right? And they often rely on multiple interpretations of a word or an idea, an image. And if you explain to somebody the punchline, well, actually what that means is, the reason that's funny is, it's not very funny anymore. So I want to offer an example of the ways in which this way of understanding can be a little bit hegemonic. It can try to explain everything in its own terms, the terms of scientific materialism. Also the terms of utilitarianism, right? So there is a beautiful way of managing water and rice production in Bali, called the Water Temple System of Bali. And it came to the attention of Western scientists who became very interested in it because they produced more rice. So they're like, ooh, very effective. What are they doing? How are they producing more rice? So they went and analyzed it. And then, very proudly, having understood everything, they explained it back to the native people of Bali. So, well, actually, this is why your thing works, right? So it's very interesting. They took this very beautiful, complex, spiritual system, right, in which there are shrines all the way along the watercourse, in which there are ceremonies that are part of the patterning of the year, in which the water is seen to be alive. They make offerings, they communicate with the water. In fact, everything is seen to be alive, interconnected, meaningful, deep. But when the Western scientists came along and explained it back to them, it was a little bit with this tone of kind of like, yes, well, we know the water's not really alive, but keep doing what you're doing. It's very good. It's very nice. It works. Makes more rice. That's why it's good. And it sort of just happens to work accidentally, not because what they're doing is actually true, right, and a deeper understanding of the nature of reality. No. They are, sort of, unfortunately, a little bit superstitious. They think the water's alive. Oh, yeah. Maybe one day they'll learn it's just H2O. Just H2O. Not real, not alive. But keep doing what you're doing. Keep going, keep the little shrines. Very nice. It's so arrogant. So arrogant to assume, from the point of view of Western science, that we know the truth. We know that everything is just matter, just dead. And all we're interested in is the product. The outcome. Is there more stuff? More rice? And it doesn't seem to occur to those scientists to ask themselves, what if the relationship that they're expressing with the water is something real? Something that we cannot explain in these terms, that doesn't fit in our view, but which is real. So you see, when I say this is hegemonic, it means like it wants to take this, the spiritual, the shrines, the relationship, the aliveness of things, and re-explain it in its own terms, in terms of efficacy, of use, of material relationships, causal material relationships. So the beauty of the system is that there is a deeper, more intimate, more living relationship with the world, with the water, with the rice. But it's also efficacious. It does make more rice. How wonderful. Right? So it doesn't exclude this. It also works. It's very practical. Right? So this way of seeing doesn't exclude the historical. Otherwise, they would starve. So, from the point of view of utilitarianism, there is a risk always of sacrificing the means for the ends. Right? It doesn't matter how you get there, as long as you get there. We may even believe that with the climate crisis. Right? It doesn't matter exactly what we have to do as long as we survive. We're prepared to do anything. And although I've said that, from the point of view of the spiritual, the ultimate generally speaking, doesn't exclude the reality of the historical dimension, there is still a risk of the ultimate dimension on its own. And this could be described as spiritual bypassing. It could be a little bit lacking in compassion to say to somebody who has just lost somebody on a migrant boat coming from Africa, don't worry, we're all one. Everything's fine. You see, it doesn't quite take into account the real human suffering. Just in the last day or two, more than 100 people in India have died because of the heat. And that number's going to be increasing. Children are dying in Mexico, also because of the heat. In Texas, they're not dying mostly because they have air conditioning. But if the power failed, people would die. Because there's a limit. Some people will say, oh, we'll adapt. But there are limits, real ones. There are temperatures we cannot survive at. And they're getting close. So, if we as spiritual practitioners go to places where there's real life suffering, people are dying, and we say, oh, it's okay, just breathe. We're all interconnected, we're all one, we have to be very careful. That could be a kind of spiritual bypassing. And we have to be careful in ourselves, because the reality of the situation is so painful, so dire, that we may experience a powerful, unconscious drive to tell ourselves that everything is okay. And to use our spiritual practice to kind of make it okay. We have to be careful of that tendency. We cannot ignore the suffering. Otherwise, whatever happiness or peace we may touch is fake. If our happiness and our peace doesn't include the suffering, doesn't arise on the ground of suffering, of the understanding of suffering, it's not real. So how is it that the Buddha can say to us something like, Drista Dhamma Sukha Vihara? It is possible to dwell happily in the present moment. It's a very, very, very strange thing to say. I find it very strange. Because if he's right, if it's possible to dwell happily in the present moment, then that means every moment. Not only some moments when we've figured everything out and we've got a nice cushion and the temperature's right and we're not hungry or tired or thirsty and nobody's sniffing or making a noise. Everything's just right. Now finally I'm happy. No, it means every moment. This is a very radical statement to make. Because we have a tendency to make our happiness dependent on a whole lot of things. Right? I'll be happy when. I'll be happy if. And that when could look very spiritual. I'll be happy when I go to Plum VIllage. I'll be happy when I'm on retreat, when I don't have to go to work. I'll be happy when I can have a really good sitting meditation. I'll be happy when there's tofu, on the line. I'll be happy when I get enlightened. Right? How much of the time do we make our happiness dependent on understanding something? I'll be happy when I've healed. When I've resolved my trauma. Only then. You have to be very careful. We may well have a tendency to defer our peace, our happiness, We make all kinds of conditions. And the Buddha is saying, no, don't wait. If it's the present moment, that means this moment. That means without changing anything. That's very strange. That goes against everything we tend to think. So, to me, what that says is it must be possible to be happy with my suffering. Right? To be at peace with my discomfort, with my fear. For example, the fear of the collapse of our civilization. Right? We speak a lot about climate grief, climate anxiety. This is the collective trauma of our times. And the Buddha says, you can be happy right now, but without denying the suffering. So, where my mind goes, generally speaking, is, okay, fine, good, but how? So just tell me what to do. But you see, that's also wrong. Because if there's a how, it's not now. It's after I've done the how. Right? I have to do the thing, follow the steps, and then. It's completely wrong. So that must mean the happiness is already there. Hmm? Yeah? What if it was? Can you feel it? We didn't change anything. It's already there. Without doing anything. And this is very good news. Because you remember I said science needs a friend. Our suffering also needs a friend. And so being able to touch happiness in the present moment, real, deep happiness, it doesn't erase the suffering. It doesn't deny it. But it can be with it. And it can accompany our suffering. And our suffering may feel very different the moment it can be embraced by that vast space of well-being, of peace, of happiness, which is available to us right now, in every moment. Sometimes in our tradition we speak of the happiness that comes from letting go. This is also very different from the type of happiness that in, broadly speaking, Western industrial civilization we are taught to seek for, to strive for, to pursue, right? The pursuit of happiness. Pursuit of happiness is not happiness. It's pursuit, it's running. So what is the happiness that comes from letting go? Letting go of what? First of all, letting go of our idea of happiness. What is your idea of happiness? What is it that you think you need? You have to ask yourself. Because usually we are convinced that we need it. Or that we need to get rid of something. And then we have to recognize that clearly. Whatever it is we think we need, even understanding, may have a tendency to think that we need understanding. Maybe we need to understand ourselves, or we need somebody else to understand us, or we need to understand the Dharma, this Dharma talk. If only I could understand, then. So can we let go? Let go of that thing that we think we need. There's something which is already there. It's always already been there. And when we are in touch with that, we also need less. We can live more simply. We don't need to consume so much. And so our relationship with the world, even on the historical side, it changes when we're in touch with this ultimate dimension, happiness which depends on nothing. So we start to see that these two dimensions are not so separate. They're linked. If we think of this as the historical dimension, and this as the ultimate, we may have a tendency to think, okay, I'm here and I want to go there because that's better. Right? So how do I get there? This is what Tai called his Zorro. There is a way. There is a connection. There's a way to move, in fact, smoothly back and forth between the historical and the ultimate. And we don't need to go anywhere, because both are already there. But our way of thinking maybe needs a little bit of help. So one way to go from the historical to the ultimate is just to look. We just look into the historical, but we look deeply, with a little bit more patience, a little bit more concentration. Where do you find the truth of no birth and no death? In birth and death. If you want to see, the ultimate dimension, you can take anything, a leaf, a flower, your beloved one, your own body. When we look into it with the eyes of meditation, what we find is everything. The entire cosmos. It's already there. Not just in space, but also in time. When we look into our own body, we find our ancestors, our father, mother, grandparents. The whole lineage is present in every cell of our body. Not just our blood ancestors, but our spiritual ancestors, our teachers. They have helped us to be who we are. They're present in our way of speaking, our way of thinking, our way of acting. And the ancestors of the land, the traditions, the laws, the peace, or lack of it, that we grew up with, is present in our body, in our consciousness. The whole history of the cosmos has led to this moment. And this present moment, is the ground of the entire future of the cosmos. If we know how to take good care of it, we can also take care of the future. This is called the interbeing of the three times. In the present moment, we find the whole history of life, of the cosmos, and the future, right in the heart of the present moment. So we look into something like time. It seems to be a historical dimension phenomenon, but you look deeply enough, what you find is the ultimate dimension. So there should be a way of living which allows us to exist in the historical dimension, to act, to do everything that we can to save everything that is precious, to protect life, to save all the beauty of humanity, of human culture, to help us to find a way of living in harmony with all the other species, our brothers and sisters, our cousins in the more than human world. To act, but with the flavor of the spiritual dimension, of the ultimate dimension, with the freedom, the joy, the peace. We're still in the world. The real world is not somewhere else. It's not after the retreat. It's now. We brought it all with us. It's all here, in us. All the joy and all the pain. And what is that way of living? I would say we are doing it. We've been doing it this whole retreat. We know that the 20th century was characterized by individualism, by the atomization of our communities, living more and more alone, a lot of loneliness, a lot of separation. And with that loneliness and that separation came more consumption. We needed more stuff to try to appease that feeling of loneliness, of emptiness inside us. And I think everyone here knows that we need somehow to rebuild our communities, to live together again. And many of us are already doing that, finding ways to create community wherever we are. The seeds of this retreat came from our Earth Holder Sanghas, our Earth Holder community. Les gardiens de la terre. In Spanish, abrazadores de la tierra. Very beautiful. So we're finding ways to live in community. But what are, do we have a blueprint? Do we have some guidelines? Yes, we do. So we're very lucky. From the time of the Buddha knew that we'd probably forget things and get confused. And so he gave us lots of nice lists. And we have a list called the 6 Harmonies. And these 6 harmonies are a kind of blueprint for how to create and sustain community. A spiritual community, a community which creates the conditions for us to touch the ultimate every day, to have the nourishment, the freedom of the ultimate dimension, but which exists at the same time in the historical realm, which can act together, which can make decisions. which can resolve conflict. And this is not a community of people going and living on the tops of mountains and caves and never talking to anyone else ever again, right? It's not passive, it's not like disconnected. No, it's in the real world. It's figuring out what to buy, what not to buy, what to build, what not to build, what to do, what not to do. How many retreats to have per year? How big should they be? You know? Should we have a cap? Do we need to build more toilets? Yes, we do. Should they be dry toilets? Yes, they should. Maybe not everybody agrees with that yet. We'll get there. You know, should we cut the grass or not cut the grass? Yeah, you see? Not so easy. So these are real problems, right? We disagree, but we want to live together. So we want to have a way to live together, which is realistic, but which creates the conditions for us to cultivate the ultimate. Our ability to rest, to dwell in peace. But not inactive, not passive. Okay, so what are these 6 harmonies? So first of all, it's the harmony of physical presence. Sometimes we speak of this as living together under one roof. It's already quite challenging, right? No, but I want to have my own house. I need my own space. I want to live in community, but I need my own space. Challenging, right? We've got to figure it out. How can we live together again? We used to live together in villages, you know, many, many more people living together in one room, in one house. Not so long ago. 100 years ago, 150 years ago. In other countries, more recently than that, and still now. But now I need my own room. I've got to be able to close the door. Yeah? So there's a tension already for us, because we've cultivated something else. But we recognize that we are community beings. We need to practice together. We need to support each other. We benefit from the collective energy. You know, when we can sit together in meditation, when we can do walking meditation together, when we can eat together. This is deep in ourselves. It's much more natural for us to live together than to live in our little boxes. So we also have the harmony of sharing resources. And if anybody, you know, for anybody who's ever tried to establish a lay community, not easy, again. It's usually the reason that communities split. Somebody has resources, somebody else doesn't. Somebody has more, somebody has less. How do we share? Can we figure it out? As monastics, pretty easy. Not so easy. Easier, maybe. You know, first of all, because we have less. Generally speaking, all across the world, you know, the less people have, the more willing they are to share. Should be the other way around, but it's not. The more generous they are. The poorer people are, the more generous they are. That is well known. But we need to relearn how to share. How to share our food, how to share shelter. We share values. That means we agree on a code of conduct We share ethics. This is, in the monastic tradition, it's known as the harmony of precepts. We share the same body of precepts. And that's a really amazing thing to experience, because it means that, actually, okay, I'll tell a story. When I first ordained, I kind of assumed that all the other monastics would basically agree with me about everything. Right? We'd just get on, we'd understand each other perfectly, because we all decided to do this crazy thing, put on robes and shave our head and devote our whole life to the path of service. And so I was like, it's going to be so amazing. I'm going to live in a community where we all agree. Nope. Sorry. Not quite so simple. We may not share affinities. We may not have the same taste. We may not appreciate the same things. But we share our precepts. And that is huge. It's the ground on which we stand. We have this deep, deep ground of agreement. These are the things that we will do. These are the things that we will not do. It's very profound. So I think in the retreat you'll have the chance to take the 5 mindfulness trainings, right? Maybe tomorrow morning or Thursday morning. And hundreds of thousands of people have taken these trainings. When I first read that text, I was 19 years old, and I looked at it and I was like, I wish I could disagree with this. I really wanted to disagree, because the problem with agreeing is that then I kind of had to do it. So annoying. Okay. I was actually pretty enthusiastic. It's a very beautiful thing to be able to read that text and to see, like, wow, there is nothing here that I don't want to do. There's nothing here that, this has expressed back to me my own aspiration before I could even name it. It's kind of extraordinary. And there is a growing community of people in the world who share these values. To me, as a monastic, it is extraordinary that I can go to pretty much any city in the world and I can be greeted by people that I have never met. I might not even share a language with them. And yet we share this. We share these values. It is the most extraordinary thing. I recently had this experience in Italy, in Milan. We had to get the train to somewhere, and it wasn't possible to go in one day, so we had to stop for a night in Milan. So somebody contacted the Sangha in Milan and said, okay, the monastics are coming through, can anybody put them up? And they're like, yes, we'll figure it out. Somebody came to meet us at the train station. And they bowed. I'd never met them before. And they expressed so much love and kindness. And they knew that when we would walk to the car, that we wouldn't want to talk. We didn't need to explain that. They already knew. We walked in silence. When we got to the house, they knew that we would eat a vegetarian or a vegan meal, and that we would like to eat maybe a few minutes in silence. They already knew. So many things were unspoken, completely shared. So beautiful. And that's in every city, pretty much, in many, many, many countries around the world. And that network can grow, and we can be part of growing that community. And this might also be, it might be the 5 mindfulness trainings. It might also just be a mission statement. Maybe our business, our organization, our NGO, maybe together we can recognize that we do have a shared aspiration, a shared mission, a shared way of doing things. And once we can identify that, we are building community. We have the harmony of insights, harmony of thought sometimes, but we share insights. And what have we been doing this week? Having Dharma sharing. We share our pain, we share our joy, we share our deep looking, we share the fruit of our practice, our insights. And that insight goes from being an individual insight to a collective insight. Everybody can benefit from it. And so our collective understanding grows. We have the harmony of decision making. So we share a decision making process. Or we make decisions by consensus. This is a very beautiful practice. It's not voting, right? It's not majority rule. And this can only happen when everybody in the community knows how to listen deeply and knows how to let go of their view. Very often, I will go into a meeting thinking it should go like this. I may have a very clear idea of what I think is the right decision. And yet, as a result of listening to the insights of many different brothers and sisters in the community, very frequently I find my view is completely different by the end of the meeting. Sometimes like 180. And sometimes, even when we don't agree, when we see that the majority of the community is in harmony, we know how to let go. Because the harmony of the community is more important than being right. We're kind of addicted to being right, to proving our point. But when we can let it go, we may discover a deeper kind of harmony. And we have this is sometimes known as the harmony of speech, but it's also a way of resolving discords. So we know we want to speak and listen in a way that cultivates harmony. But sometimes we still disagree, or we get into a situation of conflict. So we need a way to resolve that conflict. And so I think in every Hamlet you would have had a presentation of the practice of beginning anew. And we do apply this in our community. Sometimes more successfully than others. We are still very much in the historical dimension sometimes. It's not always easy, but it does work. So this is our kind of blueprint. And it's very interesting that a similar structure is shared by many, many different kinds of communities in the world. So there's an extraordinary economist called Elinor Ostrom, and she won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2009 for the work that she did to show that the tragedy of the commons is not real. So the tragedy of the commons is a so-called scientific paper that was published in the 60s by a man called Hardin. I don't remember his first name. He was an economist. Garrett Hardin, thank you. And he just sort of declared the tragedy of the commons with no evidence. It's quite extraordinary. And yet this paper has been cited, I think, more than 40,000 times. When I was at university, it was a conversation stopper. You know, if you talked about any kind of sort of utopian vision for living in harmony with Mother Earth or with other cultures or multiculturalism, somebody would say, yes, but the tragedy of the commons. And that was it. And the tragedy of the commons is the belief that we are unable to manage land or resources which are shared, which are held in common. Right, so it's, the phrase comes from old English villages, which would have a green in the middle, a common, where anybody had the right to graze their flock, their cattle or their sheep. So it didn't belong to anybody. If you had one cow, your cow could go and graze there. You didn't need to own land. You know? And Hardin comes along and says, well, obviously that doesn't work because somebody will abuse the system. Somebody will take more than their fair share. And so the solution is private property. Ownership, we need to divide it up. Everybody needs to know what is theirs and what is not theirs so that we can resolve the tragedy of the commons. Totally ignoring the fact that we had been living for thousands of years without this problem, perfectly able to manage resources shared in common without even the notion of private property. And that is still true in many, many indigenous societies around the world. It's the settlers, you know, the white Europeans who came with their maps and drew lines and said, this is ours. We own it. That's the tragedy. So Eleanor Ostrom did an extraordinary work of research with her husband and several others. And she found examples of communities all around the world which were able to manage resources held in common without them being depleted or destroyed. I think she found up to 150 different communities. And from those 150 completely different ways of figuring out how to live, she identified 8 principles that seem to exist in all of these different systems. They're called the 8 core design principles. I'm not going to have time to go into all of them now, but they share a lot with this. There's you have to have a shared purpose. You have to live together. You have to have a way of resolving conflicts. A graduated system of repercussions, you know, if somebody breaks the agreement. So there are consequences, right? But they start off very mild, you know, and then it gets more and more serious. So it's very interesting to compare. So I like these 6 harmonies because it gives us a way to work with this, with the historical dimension, and yet to be in every one of these 6 categories, 6 ways, we are allowing the possibility of the ultimate dimension, of the spiritual. And we've been doing it on this retreat. We've been living together under one roof, under maybe many roofs, but sharing space, sharing resources. We eat together. We have been living according to the 5 mindfulness trainings. We've been sharing our insights and experiences in Dharma sharing. We haven't maybe had the opportunity to do much decision making, but if you stayed here longer, that would come into play. And hopefully there haven't been too many conflicts to resolve, but again, you know, some people may have had the experience of the practice of beginning anew. And so when I think back to that meeting with the CEOs last week, it sounded like everything, all the problems that were being addressed, the types of solutions that were being offered, all existed at this level. In the historical, but also in the human realm. And I say human meaning not spiritual. Right? Now, that's actually kind of not possible, right? If there's humans, there is the spiritual dimension, but it seemed, according to the terms of the discussion, that everything is just subject to this kind of harsh economic reality. And we have to be realistic, and we have to figure out, how to organize ourselves and so on. But I think what this structure allows us to touch is a way to come together, but not as an organization, but as an organism. So we have principles, we have ways to relate, ways to decide, but they are not so rigid, not so absolute, they're flexible. And I think in this picture of community, our relationship with the living world, with Mother Earth, can also be honored, can also be present. When we can live together like this, we can also live with a much lighter footprint. Right? We can live much more in harmony with the world. We can listen. We have the time to listen, not just to each other, but to Mother Earth. So where do we listen to Mother Earth? In our own bodies, in our own feelings. Maybe the feelings of distress and discomfort that we have are not just ours. They also echo the feelings of the whole biosphere. And we just need to have the time to slow down enough to notice, to feel safe enough to listen. To listen to the voice of Mother Earth, which is in our contact with the ground, in a sense of connection. Mother Earth is right there. We can feel her presence right now. She's not somewhere else. Our contact with the ground is a partnership between this, our body, and an entire planet. Like if there was less than a whole planet, you wouldn't feel what you're feeling now. It takes a whole planet for you to sit, to walk, to stand. She's always there for us, not far away. So on the side of scientific materialism, we have an old story. It's not even up to date with modern science. It's based on 19th century physics, mostly. Right? And this idea that we are separate, that we are mostly selfish, competitive. It's the old kind of nature red in tooth and claw story. Right? That evolution is driven by competition, survival of the fittest. That's not it. That's early 19th century stuff. It's outdated and wrong. We now know that, yes, there is competition in nature, but there's so much cooperation. Maybe more cooperation. Not just between, intra-species, but inter-species. The trees look out for each other. The trees cooperate with the mycelial networks. We all but how do we take this from being just a notion, a kind of intellectual understanding, which I think by now we all get, to being a lived experience, something that we can live in and from together as a community? How do we go from the historical to the ultimate? With the insight of interbeing. Now, the insight of interbeing is not the notion of interbeing. The idea, the notion is easy. We get it. But have we touched the insight? Maybe partly yes, partly no. So there has to be a way of cultivating this insight in our daily life. And in fact, there are so many ways. Tai has given us an interconnected tapestry of practices which support the ripening of this insight. But how many times do we remember when we take a sip of tea? How many times do we remember to drink our cloud? It's a real question, it's a real practice. They've shown us how to do it, but how often really do we do it? You know, I remember as a novice, every time Tai would say it, I'd be like, oh. Yeah, of course, I know, but I'm still not doing it. Or like once in a while, you know, on a kind of special occasion. But not every time I take a sip. So that's the challenge. Now, if we are serious about giving rise to this new way of living on and with Mother Earth, if we are serious about transforming the systems, right? Systems change. Right? If our spirituality is not going to be something that we just do in private on our own and don't talk about in the boardroom, you know, if we're serious about that spiritual dimension entering into our shared life, into society, then we have to cultivate it every single day. Every time we eat, we have an opportunity to look deeply. To soften our ideas and our notions and our perceptions that make us feel so lonely, so alienated, so separate from the world. Every time we chew a piece of broccoli, we have an opportunity to feel and experience directly our interconnection with the entire cosmos. But how often do we do it? Really? Even when we're on retreat. Maybe first mouthful, maybe first 3 mouthfuls, and then the mind is off wandering. So we need to remind each other. That's also why we need communities of practice. We need many, many, many reminders. I used to say that it's so much easier to practice as a monastic. And it is, because we have so many reminders. Doesn't mean that we're better practitioners, we may be worse. But we have a lot more help, a lot more reminders. And some of those reminders are you, when you come for retreats. You know, we may have become very jaded, and we take the practice for granted. You know, and somebody coming to a retreat for the first time, they're so fresh, so alive. You know, so excited to discover this practice. And it reminds us, it keeps us fresh. So we need each other to remember. We could look at a tree and we could ask, you know, is the tree in the historical dimension or the ultimate dimension? Right? Science has a very nice way to describe trees to us, okay? And we're now starting to see them as carbon capture machines. Right? Very efficient. They're great. They don't even do any harm. Yeah, no pollution. It's kind of amazing. Really amazing. Yeah, take the carbon dioxide out of the air and they build cathedrals. And they're not just efficient, but they're beautiful. Kind of amazing. Maybe we should pay a little bit more attention. You know, when I look at our technology, I don't see anything like that. We are nowhere near. We wouldn't be able to manufacture even a single leaf. Not even a single chloroplast. Photosynthesis remains a mystery. It's kind of like magic. So is it historical or is it ultimate? For me, it's kind of spiritual. A tree is doing something I'm not sure that we can completely capture within the framework of scientific materialism. I'm not sure of that at all. I think we can describe a lot, and it's very good, but something will be missing. Maybe the beauty, the grace, the generosity, the dignity of a tree. Its relatedness to us. Trees are so patient with us. They've been here a lot longer. And they offer us their shade, their oxygen, their fruits, their beauty. So perhaps we could listen a little bit more and find solutions. And when we look for solutions to the polycrisis, we should not only look on this side, right? In the historical dimension. That is where we tend to collapse our attention when we are afraid. When we have this feeling of panic, of urgency. We are running out of time, so there's no more time for this nice spiritual stuff. It's too late. No time to sit around and breathe. We need practical solutions. But nature is full of practical solutions, which are at the same time spiritual. Right? And maybe we underestimate the power of the spiritual dimension to transform our world. Because this is, I said right at the beginning, we always get this question in our retreats, especially for climate leaders, that yes, we had an amazing time, feel so much better, thank you, that was great. But what about systems change? Tell me what to do. Because we still see these two as separate, right? We still see them as two different things. But this is just a trick. And this insight of interbeing, what it offers us is the possibility to go from the historical and to see that we don't have to go somewhere else to the ultimate, but it's already here. They are not two different things. They are two aspects of one reality, two ways of understanding the same thing. So when we show up in the boardrooms and when we have to speak, can we speak even at the level of the historical dimension, but with the dignity of the ultimate? When we walk into those boardrooms, what is our way of walking? It's not just what we say, it's how we say it, how we are, how we inter-are. And we don't know how to measure the power of an action. I used to struggle with this all the time. But what is spirituality? I was looking for it. And I was looking for it outside of the historical. Until he even gave me the name, Brother Spirituality. I was still confused. Okay, fine, I got the name, but what does it mean? Like, how do I do it? It feels so far away. And Thai made it so simple. He said, anything that we do can be spiritual. The things that we confine to the historical, the meetings, the decisions, the business, the real world, right? The stuff that's not happening on retreat. We think it's separate. I said, the only difference is whether we are there. To really be there. And we know how to do it. We know how to generate our presence. Right? The energy of mindfulness is our presence. We can have more or less. Sometimes we have less, but we know how to generate that energy. We just take a breath. We restore our presence. We gather back our scattered, dispersed mind. We return our mind to our body. We go from the thinking to the feeling. Right? Our felt sense, our embodied consciousness is in the present moment. If you are in touch with a feeling, with a sensation, you are in the present moment. If you can feel the ground under your feet, if you can feel the air on your skin, feel the breath coming in and out, you are in the present. You are generating your presence. And from that place, you can speak, you can act, you can think, and we'll do it differently. We won't think, speak, and act in the same way when we are concentrated, when we are present. And we can support each other. And these two worlds are not separate. It's already happening. Last week, there was a gathering of 40 of the most powerful CEOs in this country. And there were 3 monastics from Plum VIllage sitting there. None of the CEOs knew what we were doing there. And maybe we didn't quite know what we were doing there either, but we knew how to be there, how to generate our presence, how to speak, how to listen. And I'm confident that our presence in that gathering transformed that gathering. It allowed them to speak and to share in a different way. And as we went round the circle, the quality of the sharing got a little bit deeper, a bit more real. They started talking about their children. They started talking about their sense of responsibility. They started talking more about their awareness of their impact on the earth. And one of them even questioned, we talk about success. We talk about, being more successful as a company, but shouldn't we ask ourselves why? We always seem to be running after more. But shouldn't we ask ourselves why? Yeah. Systems change. Right? So presence, the spiritual dimension, is something that we can bring into the historical. It is not separate. It is not far away. And it does transform. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your listening. I wrote a little song for us to sing together because I thought, we can't just talk about spirituality. We have to do spirituality. We can't just talk about community. We have to do community, and communities sing. Okay, so I'm going to ask my sisters to come up. And they're being very brave because they don't know this song. I literally wrote it just before. I don't really know this song either. So We'll see what happens. Luckily, it's very simple. It's very, very, very easy. Here are the words. We are one. One with the earth. One with grief. One with joy. Okay, that's all. But we're going to sing it in 3-part harmony. Okay? Can you give me an E? Okay, so everybody on this side, you're going to sing the melody. Very, very easy. Oh, actually, everybody's going to help because we can do a rhythm as well to help us. So it's going to go like this. We are one. Yeah, okay, that's it. Yeah, so the rhythm is just. Pretty easy. Little slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We are one. One with the earth. One with grief. One with joy. We are one. Okay, good. Okay, just remember that. Second part, okay? This is the middle, okay, up to here. Okay? Very, very easy. We are one. Okay, you can do that? We are one. One with the earth. One with the earth. One with grief. One with grief. One with joy. One with joy. Okay? I'll write it out for you. Okay, this is your part. It goes like this. We are one, one with the earth, one with grief, one with joy. Okay? It's down there somewhere. You'll get it. Okay, let's try. Can we try the two together? Okay, so remember. We are one, one with the earth, one with grief, one with joy. Okay, keep going. We are one, one with the earth, one with grief, one with joy. You got it? Okay. Third part, okay? That's everyone over here. Okay, you're going to have trouble seeing this, maybe, on another board. You'll just have to remember it, okay? We are one. Sorry. We are one. We are one. One with the earth. One with the earth. Okay, now it's the same note all the way through to the end. One with grief. One with grief. And then the same. One with joy. See, that wasn't too. La la la, la la la, la. Tell me you got it. You got it. Let's just one time, just this part, okay?